My name is Rose Wong. I'm an assistant professor of social work at Cal State East Bay. Today is October 20th, 2015, and we're in Hayward, California, on the campus of Cal State East Bay. It is my pleasure to be interviewing my mentor, Dr. Terry Jones, who is our professor emeritus. The occasion is his induction into the California Social Work Hall of Distinction and the California Social Welfare Archives Oral History Collection. Dr. Terry Jones has taught here for over 40 years. He has also been a community advocate for over 50 years. I'll begin by asking Dr. Jones about some of the early events that led him to the profession of social work.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I came along in the turbulent 60s, in the heart of the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and it was just fortunate to have graduated from college and come back to my hometown, Vallejo, California, and immediately got involved in working with street gangs. That's what they call them now, I guess, but at the time we called them young men looking for trouble. And from that we got involved with putting a little pressure on the police to be less violent. So this notion of police brutality goes way, way back. So dealing with the police and the idea that we helping them to understand that they need to hire more black, policemen. Working with the school district to help them recognize that they needed to hire more black, school teachers. So there was plenty of problems, plenty of issues that needed to be dealt with, and I came back freshly with a college degree, thinking that a degree was not for yourself, but it was for your community, and you had an obligation to participate in social justice, social change, and changing things. And so this notion of being a social worker never crossed my mind, and I didn't know anything about Jane Addams and the settlement house movement, but after studying, the whole notion of social work fits, because that's what you do, is you look at injustices and you attempt to change the societal structures of society. And if you change the societal structures in society, that will relieve a lot of tension and pressure on people. Yeah. So, and there's some crazy times, I mean really crazy times. But it was just what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, you've touched on it a little bit already, but what was the political, social, and economic climate like at the time you entered the field of social work?
It was extreme inequality and extreme oppression against black and Latino populations. Those are the ones that got identified most. And access to good jobs, access to good educational opportunities. It was just assumed that that was the way it was supposed to be, that black people did not or could not have access. And so out of this notion of protest, we'd all read some of the work of Michael Harrington, The Other America. We're all influenced by that. We were given hope by Kennedy and his administration, and the notion of change and hope. And so it was just kind of felt like it was a piece of your obligation to protest and to make change in the best way that you could. And you couldn't stand on the sidelines. It's just a matter of how would you approach it. Would you approach it in a violent way, or would you think in terms of working, through the system? And I chose to attempt to do it through the system, but I've always respected and honored those who saw the need to be violent and disruptive, because I remember Frederick Douglass and change concedes nothing without a struggle. It has to be there. And so violence is, I guess, Stokely Carmichael said, or maybe it was Rap Brown, violence is as American as apple pie. White mainstream America understands violence because they're the most violent group of people probably on the face of the earth. And unfortunately, either violence or the threat of violence has to be there. And I thank God for those people who were violent. I thank them for what they did, because that made it easier for the things that we attempted to do in making the system change. Deal with us, or you deal with them. And yeah, it wasn't always a perfect straight line, but I think that holds. It held true then, and it holds true, now. So I've never wanted to speak too badly about those who are involved in violent activities, because it's a piece of the what do you call it, the fabric of how change is created in society.
Could you talk about how your career developed and what was your primary area of focus?
I consider myself then, and I consider myself now, a community organizer. I can't exactly begin to identify the point when I was, quote, a social worker, but I can pretty much identify the time when I thought that social change was appropriate, and that social justice was appropriate. That comes from my family and from my church, and from a recognition that there's great inequality in the society, and that it's not going to change without making a conscious effort for it to change. So my first work was with young black males in Vallejo, California, who were being given the worst of anything. And remember, during the summers there, if you were a white youngster, you could work at one of the fast food restaurants, or you could work for a department store, you could work somewhere, but if you were black, all those jobs were out of bounds for you. If you were going to make any money to do anything, you had to hitch a ride 30 miles or more to the fruit fields of Fairfield and Vacaville, and pick peaches or plums or whatever else was in season. And if you worked very, very, very hard, you could make maybe $8 or $9 a day. And that always struck me as being wrong. And we fought the city council. We fought the county government to say that this is wrong and you have to change. We protested. We held on picket lines. We did all of that to bring attention to the injustices being committed against black people. Not because I wanted to be a social worker, not because of any other reason other than it was wrong, and it struck me as being wrong, and that again comes from I now realize that right-wing white people aren't the only ones who have the right to talk about family values. That people of color have family values too, and it was the value in my family, the value in the people I grew up with, that you can't turn your back to injustice. You have an obligation to attempt to make a change. So I grew up on stories, hearing my mother and father and their friends talk about, well, if you kids get an education, things are going to be better for you, and you got to use that education to make it better for other people. And I took that stuff fairly seriously. Now I understand that education isn't all, but it's a little piece of it. But what I understood then, and understand now, and will always understand, is that education is not for you. It's too many people lost their lives. Too many people struggled very hard to open doors to educational opportunities so that we could step in, and so we owe something back. You know, so as old as I am now, I can't just sit down and not do anything. It's just, it ain't right yet, and not going to be right anytime in the future, but it's my obligation to do anything that I possibly can to make it a bit better. Yeah. Yeah.
You've spoken a little bit now about your community organizing work. Could you talk about some of the positions you've held in the university?
A lecturer, assistant professor, an associate dean, chair of the academic senate, most outstanding professor in the university, chair of the Department of Social Work, president of the California Faculty Association for 2 terms, organizer of 2 national conferences on multicultural university, making the university open and a better place. When I came to the university, this university and universities across the country were places that taught young white boys how to become old white men. What our effort was to change that, to say that people of color, women, needed to feel comfortable in the university, and that the university had to change. I am very, very proud of the work we did on multicultural infusion into the university. Took hold on our campus, and it took hold on campuses throughout the nation, and it started here. It started right here in California, and I'm very proud of that. This place is not the same. It's still bad. It's still too white male, dominated. It's too self-centered, with people attempting to feather their own beds with not paying attention to the expertise and the intelligence of people of color who may not be able to be measured in the same way that you measure white intelligence, but it's there, and they make no attempt whatsoever to cultivate and to dig into that and to use it. They, like a kid with a toy, they surround it and protect it and claim it as their own, when nobody else can get a piece of it, and it's despicable. It seems to me that a university ought to be a place, a beacon where all can come and we can share, and in sharing we become better and bolder and more able to serve all the population. I don't know why we're afraid. We're afraid of our potential magnificence because we're afraid of people of color and what they could participate, could contribute to the growth of knowledge and education to serve a diverse society. And it's a shame. So that, while there's been so much change, it really still hurts and sickens me to see how that piece remains the same. And they're trying harder. They're trying harder. You can have a Asian president, you can have a black president, you can have a woman president, but the structure that surrounds them is so strong, so powerful, that they can't do what's needed to be done in order to make this a great place. We're not going to become Stanford. We're not going to become the University of California. We're not going to become any of these great Tier 1 institutions. But we can become greater than anybody else in figuring out this notion of inclusiveness and multiculturalism, and we refuse to take it on and hold it as on. We give a little lip service, little tokenisms to diversity, and think that people are stupid enough to think that that's real structural change. It's insulting. It's extremely insulting, and they ought to. They know better. But they also know that as long as that there are people willing to settle for less, they can find people to support what it is that they're doing to us.
Mm-hmm. So. Would you be able to highlight some of the specific goals and sort of activities you undertook at the university over these past decades?
I created the first Black Faculty and Staff Association on campus, and was president of that for too many years. I helped, well actually I established the Ethnic Studies Department. And before that there was a couple of Black Studies students over here, some Asian Studies students over here, and Mexican American over there. And I was able to write the curriculum and design the Ethnic Studies program. And now we have one of the strongest Ethnic Studies programs in the United States. And I'm very proud of what they do and how they're doing it, and I'm proud to have been the person who put that together, along with the help of a lot of people. So I'm proud of that. Same thing with the criminal justice program. There was no criminal justice program on campus, and I was able to work with some colleagues and to write the curriculum and to put together our criminal justice program. And again, it's a pretty strong program in the state and in the nation. And I guess probably the one that's most dear to my heart is the social work program. And that one was a little bit trickier, a little harder, because we had Ed Psych on campus, and we had the sociology department, and so the university is a very, very, very vicious place, and there's some very, very political people in place, and so they were in power to make sure that that social work program did not surface. And working with some very close friends, also recognizing that the president supported it, was able to use my community organizing skills, which no one was supposed to know that I was a community organizer, to get the community involved, to get people at the state level involved, and to convince those people to show up at key meetings to help argue the point that it would be a disaster if you allowed this opportunity to pass without creating a social work program. So, that. But I guess the thing I'm also proud of is the idea of speaking truth to the white power structure of this university over all these years, and to help to institute the DELO, what do you call it, the Diversity and Equity Officer, and the idea that you had to have somebody who paid attention to the hiring and the practices of the university, and with the notion that we ought to, so we got that, and I was the primary person pushing for that. Since that time, the university has diluted it and turned it into a show and tell operation, and with no teeth to it. So I didn't get all that I wanted, but I got the notion that there has to be some place where issues of diversity, equity, and justice are looked at and paid attention to. And so I'm proud to have gotten the fight started. I think I've taken a beating though in that one, because I'm ashamed. I almost want to throw up when I see what has resulted from that. You remember those things in school where you've been going on a vacation, you get a chance to get up and tell what you did today, or what you did on your vacation. That's how we've turned our diversity process into a show and tell, and look good for the cameras, but nothing. And it also makes me sick every time I hear about what a diverse campus we are and how we're modeled for diversity. Well, almost anybody ought to be able to see that that's not true. We happen to be in one of the most diverse areas in the whole world. It would be almost impossible not to have a diverse student population. But when you look beyond the student population, when you look beyond the low-level employee population, we are one of the whitest and male faculty anywhere in the CSU, and that's a disgusting failure and a shame, because people from around the world want to be in the Bay Area. It's as closest to heaven as any of them will ever get. So we ought to be able to have world-class people of color and women on our campus, and we don't, because you got people in positions, gatekeepers, who figure out all kinds of ways to discredit and disqualify, people of color. So how can you talk about diversity? How can you talk about how diverse and we are, and what a shining example we are, when you take a look at our faculty? It's a disgrace.
Could you speak about some of the lessons that you learned through your university experiences and the struggles, and how they were useful to you later, or perhaps could be useful to others in the future with similar objectives?
That the university is a kind of like working in a snake pit. You have to move very carefully and try as hard as you can not to step on snakes, because they will bite, and some of them are deadly. So that's the number one lesson. You have to look for allies. Look for people who may not want to go all the way with you, but they will do a little bit, and they'll attempt as best they can not to hurt you. So you cultivate allies, cultivate people who have something to offer, who see a little piece of what you see. And probably the other thing is attempt to become a citizen of the university. Attempt as best you can to be of use to others. And if you can be of use to others and help people with their issues, not all, but some will help you with your issues. And this is not a sprint; it's a marathon, and you got to take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves, just take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves. I of all the places I've worked at the federal level, I've worked at the state level, I've worked for county and city and in communities, but I've never ever encountered people as vicious and as obtuse and as unforgiving as people in the university. They think that their universalism is universalism, and that if it wasn't their idea, it was no idea. And it's just amazing to me how it is that people who are supposed to be so intelligent and pride themselves on their knowledge cannot have a little bit of knowledge of themselves and how they present themselves, and how arrogant they are, and how incapable they are of attempting to understand the perspective of people who may be a little bit different than them. It's just amazing to me, So I don't know if I got that, but it's just it's not an impossible thing to make some progress. And I think if over the years, the idea to be able to, you got to have a thick skin. You got to be able to suffer insults. You got to be able to be very, very patient and look for opportunities and look for slack in the system and figure out how it is that you can rush in where that slack is and push the envelope. And also the other thing, you got to have hope. As bad as it is, think, well, tomorrow it might get a little bit better. they may not be as dumb tomorrow as they are today. And you know, so you got to have a little bit of you know, hope in doing work in the university. And I know that may be a little unfair. You know, maybe these people aren't any worse than they are in other places. But this is where I spent the majority of my life, you know, working here, and I've had the most experience with these people. And you know, and I haven't always been the most gentle person either. You know, I've done some, you know, things I wish maybe I hadn't done, and said some things that I probably should not have said in the heat of passion. Probably angered some people that didn't need to be angered. Probably left a couple of bullets in the gun that I probably should have shot them all. Not literally, but the idea of using, I'm not sure as I fought every fight as hard as I could have, you know, fought it. But what I've always felt though is that I was on the right track. I was heading in the right direction. Maybe not the exact trail, but heading in the you know, right direction. I had that direction when I had that thought when I came to the university, and I've had it all this you know, time. Is that this place can be a better institution? It can be a better place. It can be a place where everybody can feel welcome and you know, appreciated. And you know, yeah, I will hold on to that for, you know, forever. Is that it can be, you know. So and I don't know. I just wish somebody could just maybe just strike some of these people and just have, so they could have some type of what do you call it, a religious conversion to the idea that you know, I don't have to be right on everything. I don't mind sharing. I don't mind attempting to understand things from another perspective. I don't need to be as frightened as I am by giving up a little bit of power. You know, that to me is what it's a dream, I guess. Is I'd like to see it, and I don't know what it is about people with power. I've never seen anybody say, I got more money than I need, and I've never seen anybody say, I got more power than I ever need. But this notion of sharing, which I think is the heart and soul of what it is that social work is about, and why I think we're so good for the university. You know, and I think we have been wonderful for this university in terms of how, you think of what we've taught them about how to diversify a faculty. You know, what we've taught them about how to teach, and you know, how to, what a university ought to be about. It ought to be about academics, but it ought to be about professional issues. It ought to be concerned about the communities that we're supposed to serve. We've done a wonderful job of demonstrating that to the university, and I don't think we've always been appreciated for it. But every time an accreditor comes by, they roll us out, and they roll us out to show what diversity looks like. They roll us out to show what community participation looks like. They roll us out to show about you know, students who take advantage of the institution to go on to positions and careers. That's why they roll us out. So little by little, I think we're having an impact on this university. I know we're having one nationally, because wherever I go, they always talk about how diverse, you know, we are as a program, and how our students are taking leadership positions, you know, across the state.
Going back now to your community organizing work, could you speak about maybe some of the lessons you learned in that facet or component of your life work, and what might be useful to other people, or what became useful to you as far as lessons and experiences learned?
Yeah. Take people where they are. Understand that people may not necessarily have a degree like you have. They may not necessarily even understand the problem that's presented from your perspective, but you gotta slow down and take people where they are and understand the world, from their perspective. People have intelligence in all kinds of ways, and so and patience, more so than anything else, is you may have a schedule. You may be on need a report that needs to be turned in by X number of time, but people on the street, they don't necessarily have that same timeline. They don't necessarily see the world from that perspective. So just being able to understand what it really means to take people where they are and to work with them and to understand them from that perspective, and to develop what now is beginning to be more popular, but what we understood way back then is this understanding of cultural humility. And you might not know necessarily about a particular population, but you can let people know that you want to know, that you care, that you want to know, and you want to understand. So it's been one of the things that's guided me in all of what I've done. But the other is, you got midgets, or probably it's politically incorrect now, but small people shouldn't form alliances with big people. And so when a county government or a city or any entity comes making demands or requests, you have to be very, very careful about how you work through any type of partnerships, because they have much, much more power, and you got to be able to figure out, well, what's in it for me, the smallest person in this. How do we create a condition that levels the playing field? You may make short-term agreements. You may do all kinds of things, but always be wary of these large institutions who come with a bag of goodies for you to do something that they say is in your best interest. Well, whose interest is it in? And how do we really work through how it is that a smaller group with less physical, economic power, what does a relationship look like, and how do you establish a relationship? So that's just really important. You can't make arrangements on or agreements on word. It has to be written, it has to be researched, and you have to look at what are all the consequences. And you just really, this is a harder one, but you just generally don't and shouldn't form alliances with people you don't know. Back in Vallejo in those early days, we created an organization called the Black Society on Unity and Liberation. And one of the things that made that organization so effective in fighting the police and fighting the school district and fighting the city is that all of us knew each other. Some of us knew each other since grade school. And that kind of knowledge, especially during the 60s, when the FBI and police agencies were always sending infiltrators in and trying to disrupt and throw you off. I knew who I was dealing with. They knew me, and they knew what my motives were, and they knew where we were. Now, it's not impossible that one of those people could be bought off, but the probability is less because you're dealing with people that you know and you trust. And even today, when we come to these large impersonal institutions, the notion of you can't know all there is to know about a person, but before you get into anything serious with them, you better know something about them. And I also learned that a little later when I went down to an organization in Oakland. I forget the name of the organization. It was a Latino organization. And I was there. I was in a hurry, and met the director, and we were talking, and I was trying to get my plan out. And he said, "No, just sit down. Just relax. Have some tea. Have some. Let's talk for a while. Let's get to know each other." And that's always stuck with me. The idea of make any arrangements, any agreements with people that you don't know, that you can't establish a relationship. And sometimes in our haste in the university, we don't have time to sit down and have a cup of tea to attempt to. And he asked me, he says, I'm from this little town down here. He got up and showed me the map, and he told me the stuff. He said, "Where are you from?" And I'm thinking, damn, well, I got to go. But the idea that he made us have a connection. And I think that's important too, is the ability to have a connection and a correction. Also, you're just going to make some mistakes. This is tough work. And these people that we're dealing with, they may be racist, they may be sexist, they may be all kinds of things. But one of the things over the years I've found is that they're not stupid. And sometimes they're going to get you. And you got to have the resolve and the resilience to get up and try to figure out, how can I go at it again? How can I not let them get me like that again? They didn't get where they are by being stupid. So in there is some of what I've learned. But I think for if I were communicating to a student, I would say just that you just have to have patience, and you just have to be able to focus and establish what it is your goal is, and to create allies and to work with those allies to achieve your goal. Yeah.
Can you give an example of any moment when you were clearly not successful, and what obstacles you faced, and how you yourself dealt with that?
Yeah. And by the way, there's still long-range consequences today to failing in this instance. And you as a faculty member are suffering from it. When I was president of the statewide union, California Faculty Association, we were fighting not just for wages and working conditions, but we were fighting for a say in the university. And for a while we were making progress, but because we were able to identify key legislators, and we were able to work with those legislators, and those legislators were very helpful to us in fighting off and pressuring the CSU. We were so successful that the CSU decided to use the same tactics to cultivate legislators as we were using. They had more money, more time, and more resources to put in on it. And so over the years, they've won that battle. And what they've done is turn the university into a more running like a corporation. And their mantra is to do more with less. And the administration has claimed supremacy in the university. It didn't used to be that way. Faculty had a powerful stake and a powerful say in what we did and how we did it in the university. Now we got would-be administrators who spent not a day in the classroom dictating what, by the way, our own president, dictating what educational programs ought to look like, how we ought to be spending our hard-earned dollars in terms of carrying out the educational mission of the university. And to me, that's just a sin. How could it happen that faculty have lost control of the university, or at least lost an ability to resist the administration, and it's running this place like a corporation, dictating how the institution will be. And so, yeah, we lost. We lost. That. And I don't know if we'll ever, get it back. The ability to be an equal partner at the table in determining how higher education will take place in the university. And that's something that, and they talk about efficiency, and they talk about, efficiency to them means, well, one tenure track faculty costs X number of dollars. 4 lecturers cost X. Hire the 4 lecturers. That's their notion of efficiency. They don't factor in what it is to establish a relationship with a student that only a faculty member who that's his job or her job can really do in terms of doing with the advising and the nurturing and the support of students. That cannot be done by a part-time adjunct. And this is not a slap at part-time adjunct faculty, because they're doing a wonderful job, but they're also being abused and taken advantage of. And in any university, there ought to be adjuncts, because they come with a special expertise and special knowledge that's useful to supplement what we do. But you can't turn over almost 50% of the teaching of our classes to adjuncts. What that does is create more power for the administration to, some people actually run around here thinking that these administrators are our bosses, and it never used to be the case. That, we were participants at the table in determining what education looks like. So that's a failure. I'm hoping that people like you and other people will take this on and figure out a way to fight them in a better way than we fought them. But they need to be fought tooth and nail to a point where we can regain a place at the table in determining what high quality education ought to look like. And it cannot be by a president or a gang of administrators who are only concerned about getting a bigger computer screen, or concerned about feathering their nest and making sure that the toilets are cleaned in their buildings, while faculty work in the most horrendous conditions imaginable. That's not what higher education is to me. And just it ought to be, anybody ought to be able to figure out that how can you really speak intelligently about what education ought to look like unless you've taught, unless you've spent some time and had some of your skin scraped off in the classroom attempting to figure out how to teach students. Now, I'm not saying that a person can't be very valuable to the university who hasn't taught. I'm sure they can. But how can you expect being run by a gang of people who, for the most part, have no teaching experience? How can they do it? So yeah, we lost that one, and I hope we'll figure out a way to regain it.
Can you talk about some of your most satisfying experiences, either in community work, organizing, or at the university?
Yeah, there's been a lot of them. All these meetings I've taken, there's been some good things that that have happened. To see young black kids help to organize, put pressure on recreation department to say that even though we're living out here in the projects, that we too deserve a swimming pool. And even though we're living out here in the projects, and the Little League baseball team is in the city of Vallejo, and we're out in the county, and you tell us we can't participate, to be able to put enough pressure on to have funds created to allow Little League baseball to come to the projects for a swimming pool to exist. That's Probably nothing will match the pride that I have in being able to help in seeing that come about. But again, I guess in the university where I've spent most of my working days is the notion of bringing the notion of multiculturalism and diversity and inclusion into the university, and to have it talked about as a bad word, as lowering standards, as attempting to dilute the quality of higher education. You don't hear those conversations anymore. Even the dumbest of them can use the words. Now their commitment may be a bit shaky, but they understand that this is a new day, that students won't stand for it, voting citizens won't stand for it, but and that is, you can't insult people of color any longer, you can't insult women any longer, you cannot recognize their contributions, you cannot continually make them feel as outsiders and alienated. They got to feel a part of the institution. That movement started here on this campus, and probably all over the country they're claiming credit for it, but I claim it for us here, and we have made some progress, no doubt. We have a hell of a lot of work to do, so I'm so proud of my participation in making the notion of real higher education possible on this campus. I'm really proud of that. But I'm also proud of the creation of the social work program. Now I understand that people are coming out all over the woodwork to claim credit, for that. But when I was asked to take this on, nobody would step forward. And I had to assemble a borrowed secretary, an assistant professor who they couldn't find anything else to do with, and who was, well, one won't say afraid of a shadow, but who was a little cautious. And we worked day and night in putting together a curriculum. But that wasn't enough, because in the university there's some sharks in the water, and those sharks see people swimming above the water as threats, and many saw social work as a threat to other departments, and they wanted to make sure that we did not exist. But to work through that, to fight through that, to call on allies, to call on people, and this is where the community organizing comes in again, to call on people in the community, to call on people in the legislature to step forward and to help with that. So we're able to create not just a social work program, but we're able to create a social work program committed to social justice and change and the elimination of oppression in society. That's our mantra. That's what we did. And now, 10 years later, to having graduated, I don't know, probably almost 1,000 people, and to see people who, many of them may have been, not many of them, but some who have been welfare recipients themselves, who are now in responsible middle class positions, supporting themselves and their family and their community, and also serving in a special way, a way that maybe no other people can serve in terms of eliminating and addressing issues of poverty. That's a wonderful feeling. And to walk down the street and to go places and have people say, "Hey, Dr. Jones, how you doing? You remember me?" It's just a wonderful feeling. But to think in terms of the accomplishment of putting something through that many thought was impossible, and now 10 years later to see its growth, and the potential is just unlimited, and I just feel good about that. Just the notion of pulling that off. It's almost impossible, but we did it. I'm very proud of that. But that leads me to another thing that I'm proud of right now too, is I'm working with a group of black teenagers, probably 13, 14 years old, middle school, kids, and working with them on how it is you be black in a racist society, especially a black male, and work through that with these kids, and see them attempting to understand, to see them challenged, to see them lights go off, and then to walk down the street in the mall and to hear somebody else, "Hey, Dr. Jones, how you doing?" That's wonderful. Just a wonderful feeling. So some of the stuff that's going on has been good, but I think my best stuff is out there in the future, and trying to figure out a way to make some of these institutions really recognize and understand black young men and what it is they need and what we can do to help them. So I'm just thankful for being here at this time to be able to put my little mark on it. Yeah.
Could you talk about how you see the field of social work as having changed across the decades, and how that might be related to also changes in the political, social, and economic climate?
Wow, that's a lot. It's, social work is, we're caught in a situation where we're kind of like the floor mat, and try to create a situation which makes sure that nobody falls beneath this floor. So changes in the vicissitudes of society and the economy just really is a great force on us, always. When I entered the profession, I had something called AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children. And that was kind of our contract with society. And we said that no matter what, our government is committed to providing something at some level. Maybe not adequate, but at least we're committed to that. The politics of the 60s with Kennedy and the Great Society, and then later with the right wing beginning to come in, and to the war in Vietnam, created this inflation and high unemployment, a whole bunch of stuff was created, and it helped to create a Southern strategy of resistance. And these people, instead of looking at what was really going on, they used black people and the poor as scapegoats, and the politics of poverty, and they turned it in a way that average working people, white, many of them Southerners, but many of them Northerners, began to align against the Democrats and against welfare programs and against those efforts. So I was a piece of and did my work all while that was going on, and it became harder and harder to get support in terms of money and even lip service support to do things that were considered good, to do social service work. Even to the point now where the Republicans with this Southern strategy has driven the Democrats from the left more to the center, and a notion that the problem is not our economy, the problem is not growing inequality, but the problem of these poor people, these black people, these welfare queens. So working through that has been very, very difficult, because it has created all kinds of redefinitions and strains in terms of what is welfare, how much of an obligation does society have. And you know, it's just been a very difficult struggle to help to identify what the real issues are in society. The real issues are not welfare queens. The real issue is not welfare programs creating laziness or people not willing to work or creating inflation. The real problem is corporate greed and a lack of corporate social responsibility. And our work to do is to be much more vigilant, much more assertive and aggressive in identifying the nature of the problem and strategies for solving the problem. That's a kind of rambling piece of it, but I've been all through that in my career, with the focus always being on trying to figure out how to get more resources, how to get more services, but recognizing now that we're being driven more by almost like a defensive nature. Why should you be defensive about providing basic necessities for a population? Why should you be defensive about providing health care for anybody who's in need or housing? You know, some of the poorer nations in the world say that health care is a right. It's not a commodity. Why are we so far away from that? We should not be ashamed that as social workers that we're concerned about health care. And we shouldn't be ashamed of being a social worker that we are concerned about people's living conditions, that there are too many people in prison. So we have to be a little bit more assertive and aggressive in helping to identify a real culprit of societal injustices. And it's difficult, but that's keep our eye on that prize, and we'll be much better off for it.
Could you elaborate a little bit on then what should we be doing as social workers?
Well, the United States imprisons 20% of the world's prison population. That's more than Russia, more than China, more than just about any other nation, but more than any other nation in the world. Something wrong with that picture. There are more people, black people, under the control of the criminal justice system and the penal system now than there were enslaved in the 1860s. There's something wrong with that picture. White young people commit more crimes for drug pushing than do black youngsters. But black youngsters are 4 to 5 times more likely to be incarcerated in prison for that. There's something wrong with that. As social workers, we have to address that. That's dealing with issues of social justice. That's dealing with what Jane Addams would have said was something wrong with the structure of society. Mental health is important. Individual therapy, all of that is important, but we have to turn to the societal structures that are causing so much havoc and differentially on certain populations. Social work is notoriously absent in being on the front lines and addressing this attempt to criminalize black people, Latinos, and poor people in general. We have to do something. We have to do a much better job about it. Coupled with that, and not probably related to that, is this notion about income redistribution. We don't talk about that very much. But when about 1% or 2% of the population controls about 80 to 90% of the well, something wrong with that picture. Social work again has been notoriously absent in the discussion about a redistribution of income and how that might play out, and who might be the players, and what might our role, be in it. So we have to step up and take a look at structural inequalities in society and how we can be more frontline players in that inequality.
Dr. Jones, any thoughts on what you might do differently if you were to do it all again?
Yeah, think about that sometimes, and it's a hard one because I would like to think that I would like to think that I know I did. I spent too much time in this university and fighting these people here and trying to create change, and not enough time using my substantial community organizing skills to bring pressure from outside on to this place. And if I had it do over again, I would spend more time trying to convince certain segments of the community how it's in their interest to make sure the faculty looks more like their constituents. I'd like to try to convince some of those people that they may be able to influence the university in doing a better job of preparing people of color and low-income people for higher education. As long as the struggle was me and a few against the unbelievable power of this university, they're going to win. And I should have known that. They're going to win most of the time, all the time almost. And maybe it was just easier, I don't know. But it just, a piece of me says that with some of the people I know, some of the institutions I'm aware of, that I could have brought more pressure to bear on this institution. When you go, if you go to black churches and you ask for their help, well, intellectually, well, hey, those people got trouble of their own. They ain't got no time to come up here to the university. Or that organization, they got trouble of their own. They don't have time to come up. And so you kind of intellectually use that as an excuse for not trying. But another piece of attempting to rationalize that is that it's in those people's interest to make these people do the right thing, as they say, to place pressure on them. And they would not nearly have been so bold and as arrogant as they have been if the right people in the right community organizations were here holding their feet to the fire. As I intellectually think about it, it's a little naive, but there's a little truth to that. You got midgets, small people, don't do well in conflicts with big people. So how do you increase your size? How do you increase your power? How do you increase your influence? And as I think about this, talking to some students about attempting to deal with organizing and understanding is you gotta bring some type of force to bear. The goodwill, just don't get it done. You gotta bring something, with you. You gotta, because that's what they understand. And if you can't meet them with something that they can fear, something that they can be a little apprehensive about, you're going to lose most of the time. And I've lost most of the time. So that would be the lesson.
In closing our interview, is there anything else that you would like to share or add to about what you've already discussed today?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. A dumb person would say, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm not dumb. I think I'd be much more planful. I'd be much more patient. I'd spend much more time trying to bring allies into the fight. That probably would have meant there had been fewer fights, but those fights may have been, more successful. And over all my life, I think I've been a combination of impatient and patient. And the impatience may have caught me. Go ahead and do it myself when it was too hard or took too much time to explain or to cultivate, to bring people along. I think I would attempt to teach patience, attempt to try to, it may be good for me to jump out there, but it may be in the long run not effective. And so a good organizer takes people where they are, and you move them when they're ready to move. So that's what I'd bring. And I don't know, I think doing it over again too, I may have done a better job of selecting targets. And sometimes just you go because an opportunity is created, and you rush rush in. And there are some advantages to that, but I think there's some disadvantages. So in second guessing, I think I would attempt to be a much more patient person. I think what I've done, very, very well though, is to be able to get some people to do some things that they wouldn't normally have done. If I had to do over again, I probably wouldn't vilify people so much. I might speak nicer to people. I might do that, and there are probably some advantages to that. But on occasion, it sure feels good to tell somebody what a rotten son of a bitch they really are. But that's good for me, not necessarily good for the cause. So I'd be a little bit more in control. But I don't think I want to take my passion out. So that's a hard one, to deal with maintaining one's passion and exuberance. But I think on occasion that's been a problem. So I wouldn't do it exactly the same way. I would there's probably a lot of different things I would have changed. But I tell you what, I wouldn't give nothing for the journey. Wouldn't give nothing for this wonderful opportunity to attempt to change a very oppressive system, very oppressive country, very oppressive university that we're living in. And it's just whatever gods may be, provided me with I don't know if it's a spirit or whatever, to be able to be here, to be engaged in this. And I only wish that I had done more. I'm still trying. I only wish that I had been there to see what this would really look like if it were done right. But I can dream, and I will. I'll continue to dream and try to figure out stuff. This stuff I'm dealing with these young black males. I am so happy to be able to do it, and there's a solution, and to be able to work with some people and try to figure out, that solution. And and again, I'm a little wiser now, and I'm deliberately not trying to scare anybody, and I think that means I'm still getting these school administrators to at least engage. And if you get them to engage and they're not running off frightened, I think we're going to make some progress. and I'm looking forward to it. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much for the interview.
Yeah. Thank you for doing it. Yes,